hold so much weight as she has a story in the 4th edition of the big book. So me too. If she says something's good, I'm like, okay, you're in the big book. Okay, whatever you say, I'm going with it. So I'm so happy to be with you tonight and happy to be asked. And, it's been, pandemic and the lockdown has had its challenges, certainly. And, but it's also had its blessings. I would never have been here otherwise. I picked up so many new sponsees through Zoom, and, we're in it together, shoulder to shoulder. And that wouldn't happen without this either. And, so isn't that God at work? You know what I mean? Like stuff goes down that we can't control because life's in session, and then God finds a grace to it. And it's our job to open up our eyes and see the grace and then to take action. And before I jump into my story, I want to say the most important thing about me. And the most important thing about me is that I have been sober since October 29th, 1979. I took my first drink when I was 14 years old. I took my last drink when I was 17 years old. And in September, I turned 58, and in October, I celebrated 41 years of sobriety. And I'm sponsored. My sponsor has a sponsor. She has a sponsor. I sponsor. My line goes down. And I shouldn't even say it goes down. I should say it continues, because I don't sponsor because I'm, above or ahead or the authority of anybody. What my sponsor, the fabulous Miss Paula P, has taught me is that we are shoulder to shoulder. And why we walk side by side is because if my ladies stumble, how am I going to catch them if I'm so far and above them? And if I stumble, how are they going to catch me? Before I jump into my story, also, I want to say a minute what my life is like now. I've been married almost 23 years to a man that people in AA call St. Richard, which I thought was a compliment. And then I'm like, oh, they're talking about me. So maybe not so much a compliment, but he deserves to be called a saint. He's a kind, introverted, sweet, giving, unselfish man. He's not an alcoholic at all. And I married him. I was about 18 years sober when we got together. In 23 years of being with him, I have seen him drink one hard drink one time. In 23 years, I've seen him drink 3 beers at the same time 2 times. I've seen him drink 2 beers at the same time 10 times, but who's counting? And that's an accurate count. And I don't know what took me so long to ask them this. We were driving around just a few years ago, and the question occurred to me. And I said, Stu, you need to, darling, please, thank you. And I turned to him and I said, how do you know when to stop drinking? And he mulled it over and he said, because I start to feel it. What? Hello? And like, honey, you got to push through that. And I said, nobody respects a quitter. Don't quit 15 minutes before the miracle. But, at that moment, even saying it now, I have no concept of what he's talking about. What that tells me, and my sponsor has also taught me, is that we know this is true, that our disease is progressive. It doesn't stop being progressive because we got sober. We know that's true. Medicine tells us that's true. Our own eyes tell us it's true. If we have gone out and paid the second most ultimate price, which is pick up the liquid higher power, or we know someone who has gone out and picked up the liquid higher power, we see that their drinking is quickly to the point, has progressed to the point as if they had continued to drink the whole time they had been sober. Because we know it's true, that means my recovery has got to be progressive as well. I am not going to stay sober on 5 years ago spiritual experience or the 4-step I did 4 years ago. The longer I'm sober, I don't go to less meetings. I go to more meetings. I don't sponsor less people. I sponsor more people. I don't do less service work. I do more service work. I've seen too many die. Too many. And that last part of the first step, the part after the dash, where our lives have become unmanageable, the consequences is what that means. Here's the gig on that whole thing, man. We pick up a drink, then the drink picks up a drink. Consequences are out the window, and they are every time worse than we could have imagined. And I can tell you about alcoholism from all kinds of perspectives. I can tell you about it because I grew up in my mom's alcoholic home. I was the youngest of 5 kids, and I was the smallest at the worst of her drinking. I can tell you about that alcoholism. I can certainly tell you about my own alcoholism. And now I can tell you about the perspective of alcoholism that I had ached to never know. I have 3 sons. I had them far into my sobriety. The first at 13 years sober, the second at 15 years sober, and the last at almost 20 years of sobriety. I had meant to parent the hell out of them. I had meant to love alcoholism away. As if a mother's love, as deep, primordial, and instinctual as it is a power greater than our disease. It is not. And when I got into AA a couple years, I followed my mom into AA a couple years after she got sober. And of course, when I got into my 8th and 9th step, I made amends to my mother. You know, she had to watch me dying because we got a disease that's organic. It doesn't stay still. We're either surviving, recovering, or we're going backwards. We're not the stay still kind of people. So when I got to my 8th and 9th, like I said, I made amends to my mother, you know, for her having to watch me die like that, for the things I did to her. And now, decades after she's gone, I finally know what I did to my mother. And my 2 oldest sons are dying of alcoholism. And it's the oddest thing. I have 41 years of sobriety. I am a miracle. You are miracles. I know that to be true. I have a direct partnership relationship with the God of my understanding. And yet you're looking at a mother in despair at the same time. And we will see. And I know that God works in connections and circles and options and chances. And it might be, it could be that somebody here might get something out of something I say. And because you never know, one of you could be the one standing at that back door to a room of Alcoholics Anonymous with a cup of coffee in your hand to say, welcome to my baby boy. I grew up in Central California. The real truth of that is Fresno, which I really never admit, but there's the full truth. I always say Central California because it sounds cooler, I guess. But it was, comparatively to my little town now, it's a pretty big city, compared to cities in Illinois. And my father was wealthy and influential and powerful and rich and famous. And we had the kind of home that goes along with having a father like that. We had a maid and a gardener and a pool man. And then the 4 hideous horsemen of alcohol entered our home in the form of my mother. And one by one, as a little girl, 6, 7 years old, I watched all those good things leave. And one of those things to go was my father and his wealth and his influence and his power and his money. And then we were poor and hungry and with a famous last name. So I am telling you, the hunger was real, but the secret was fierce. And my mom was a rough drunk, man. She would be drinking, vodka in her coffee to stop the shakes. God bless her, and she'd come to in the morning and see the damage, the consequences unintended that had happened to her children because of the drinking and the bad men she'd allowed into our home that she threw us to because of her drinking. And she'd come to and see what she had done, and then she'd have to drink again, because how can a mother live with that? You know the shame of a mother. You know the shame of a father. And my mother was already broken by my dad because he was violent and terrifying. And that's how I forgave my mother, man. She never once, she died with 20 years of sobriety, and she stopped going to AA once she got 3 years of sobriety. So I got to see, what it's like to have no alcohol and no God. And I am promising you this. Eventually, one of those things will win. But cancer got her first. And she never did make amends to me for the things that went down. And I would always say to myself when I came in here with an organ of hate and rage and self-pity, if only she'd say she's sorry, if only she'd acknowledge what happened, then I could be okay, then I could get over it, then I could let it go. And she never did. So I had to use these steps and the help that these steps led me to to forgive my mother. And you're looking at a free woman. My favorite part of the big book is page 124, where it says, cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. Hold on. Did that word just say greatest? No possession greater. By the time we get to 124 in the big book, we've gone through all the 12 steps, all those gifts, all those promises of all the 12 steps, and there's still no possession that we have that's greater than our dark past. The same dark past I drank over, the same dark past I kept secret in AA, and the secret almost killed me. Yes, that dark past. There's another phrase to insert instead of the word. There's another way to say our dark past, and that is the language of the heart. Here we are, eyeball to eyeball, knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder. We are the ones who can speak each other's language. Remember this. Bill Wilson loved Dr. Silkworth. He believed Dr. Silkworth. And after many treatments, Dr. Silkworth had to look at him and say, you just may die. There's nothing more I can do for you. And Bill believed that. And then, unasked for, Ebby shows up with just 2 months sober. And he shows up at Bill's house and speaks the language of the heart. That's how we roll. And look, too, how that went. It's not like Bill came to on another of the 1,000 mornings and said, hey, I think I want to stop drinking again. And I'm going to call that old school friend of mine, Ebby. I hear he's clean. No, that's not what happened. Ebby just shows up. And it wasn't that Dr. Bob just came to one morning and said, you know what? I think I want to stop drinking. I'm going to try this again. Maybe there's a businessman in town I can reach out to. No, Bill just showed up. God and Alcoholics Anonymous have interfered in my life without permission numerous times and saved me every time. And when I'm working with a new woman or I meet a new woman, I do not hand her my number and say, call me. Holy Jesus, are you kidding? That phone weighs 1,000 pounds. I just made a barricade between them and getting help. I get their number. I call them. Why not? I'm on the phone all the time. I'm on the phone getting my decaf soy organic locally sourced latte. Why not make a phone call? Why not save a life? Never forget, we are in the business, the earnest business of saving lives. You get a shot to save a life, you go ahead and take the shot. And here's the deal, man. The day before I took that first drink when I was 14 years old, there were 3 things I hated. I hated God. And I hated myself, and I hated alcohol. Man, but I took those drinks, which was 3 bottles of wine, and ding, I felt alive for the first time. And I have a strange thing to say about that, but I still feel it's true. The strange thing is this. Alcohol saved my life until it didn't. Because at 14, man, dealing with the damage of, the consequences of the men my mom threw us to and the hunger, all those things, how alcoholism rolls. That's all, how alcoholism can roll sometimes. I was ready to just be done with this living thing. But I took those drinks and I knew immediately I could live for that. And I did till it almost killed me. And it saved my life until it didn't. Because alcohol is the great seducer, the master thief, the brilliant mad scientist, the liquid higher power. Bill Wilson says we do have 2 higher powers, alcohol, who obviously at the first step we know we have no control over. So it's a power greater than us. And then there's just one above that alcohol. And sometimes that's just the worst news. I always want to say, I'm so sorry to tell you, but you've got to find a power greater than alcohol, greater than you and greater than alcohol. Here's the good news. It can be anything. The rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous when I stumbled in here at 17 years old were a power greater than me. I just used that for a long time, and that's fine. Here's how my huge spiritual rearrangement started. Here it is. Everything's just like we got to reach like happy, joyous, and free, or like a fourth dimension. Here's how mine started. I'm like, maybe, and that was it. I got my big toe on the broad highway, and here's the beauty of us. You just get your big toe on the broad highway by just saying maybe. And God and AA will meet you right there. I was court mandated to go to AA meetings my entire drinking, which is 3 years. I'm going to make it sound so long and awful, but it felt long and awful. Because my mom got sober almost to the day I started drinking, man, and she wanted me, at least one kiddo, to make it out of the madness, and I was worse than all my siblings. I would hit her. I made a homemade flamethrower. So nice. I would run away. I was always getting incarcerated. She turned custody of me over to the state of Nebraska because she'd moved us. That's a state, if you didn't know, holy Jesus, Nebraska. And sorry, Ralph. And he used to live there too. And so I was just crazy, and when I got to you, I was more feral than human. I was a savage girl from a savage place, and with brain damage, and I'd come into the rooms at that 14th or 12th Street clubhouse, and I'd come late on purpose because more people look at you that way, and I'd be showing body parts that should never see any kind of sunshine, and because that's what you do in an AA meeting. I was thinking about this analogy just recently, like me, like showing it all in an AA meeting. It's like wearing a bikini to your next chemo appointment. It's just like crazy. Like, this does not follow. Anyway, I was 17, so immature, but way more immature than even a normal 17-year-old. But I'd come in the meetings and I'd sit in the back with my, what I thought was so cool and intimidating leather jacket, Jesus. And I'd given myself tattoos on my big toes. One was the Rolling Stones lips with the tongue hanging out. And then the other was the Blue Oyster Cult hooked cross, because I thought that would scare y'all. Like, it was Iowa. Nobody sees your toes in Iowa. But like, I'd come in and I'd sit in the back of the room with my arms crossed, after having just like gossiped about everybody in the lower floor of the clubhouse. And I tell you, man, I was so angry and so hateful, so full of that organ of self-pity and hate and uniqueness for what had gone down when I was a little girl. And I'm telling you though, man, I could hear you. I can hear you quote from the Big Book where it says, deep down inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Oh, I'd hear you, but I'd think, but not for me. God had done me wrong. But because and only because you have been honorable, not one man hit on me, because I'd come in here fist raised. Every institution, including my own home I'd been in, there'd been some nasty man. I had to put up with some nasty stuff. So I was just waiting for you to be another place like that. And you were honorable. And only because you were honorable, I could at least believe that you believed. And that was it. That was my big toe on the broad highway. And I could hear you quote from the 12 by 12 where it says, nature and God alike abhor suicide. Ooh, I'd hear you say that and I think, but not for me. That's still a pretty strong option B for me. But because you had been honorable, I could believe that you believed and that there was a way to be alive and not want to die and not have alcohol all at the same time. And I didn't know the word of what I saw in you, how you caught my eye, but you were so clean, well-lighted place, and you were welcoming and kind and warm, and you looked at me instead of look away, and you brought me coffee, and I mean, now I know the word that you were was hope. I'd never seen it before. I didn't know what that word looked like or felt like, but I could stay for that. And when I was court mandated to go to those meetings before I ever got sober, from when I was 14 to 17, I was not sober at any meeting I went to. And and of course they knew I wasn't. So I don't remember a word those people said to me. And it was back in this little tiny town in Nebraska where I had to go to all those meetings where I did all my drinking, and they all knew my mom and loved my mom. And she would go to me and say, well, Paula tried to kill me again today, or Paula got arrested, or Paula stole from me. So I knew they knew, man. So I'd go in again, fists raised. And they were kind, unceasingly kind. So for those 3 years, man, like I said, I don't remember a word that was said in any meetings, but I remember how they made me feel. I remember the love. I will never be done paying back my debt to Alcoholics Anonymous, nor do I ever want to be done paying back my debt to Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I came here, I didn't know basic life things. Like I owned a car, but I didn't know there was such thing as antifreeze or oil. I'd never heard of an income tax issue. I never had a checking book. Someone in AA had to teach me how to have a checking account. I didn't know this little handy life tool that you get a job, wait for it, and go to that job on time. Like crazy things. My first matching set of dishes was some lady gave them to me. It was 2 white dishes. And I said, what a God, I felt so fancy. But I hated men and I really hated women. So, it's kind of lonely. I'd go to work and I'd get off and I'd play Yahtzee by myself and cheat. Just craziness. And I mean, that time in those meetings where they treated me with such kindness when I was drinking, and then when I went to Sioux City to get sober, and that they treated me with kindness and welcome there too, man. I mean, if I got a chance to lead with love, I'm going to lead with love. Let them remember the love. Let them remember the love. I get a lot of questions. I'm sure we all, and I maybe it's coming up more during this lockdown. I'm not sure. Maybe I seem to be hearing it a lot, but people have sponsees who are on some kind of drug, or they're still, not all the way sober with outside issues, or those kind of things. They're like, do we even waste our time with them? I'm like, what are you talking about? What? Yes, waste. Yes. Let them remember the love. Do that. Let's lead with that. Well, God can do something with that. And I had 2 senior years. My second senior year of high school was my first year of sobriety. And I was incarcerated for almost my first 2 years of sobriety. So by the time I got unincarcerated, I had, like I said, almost 2 years. And I couldn't wait till I had 2 years, because that's plural. And if there was a debate in an AA meeting, I could say, well, I've been sober for years now. And I think... And I couldn't read the big book because that was for you old people. I was going to write my own version. I couldn't get a sponsor because I can't find anybody smarter than me. It's just craziness. The only way that I made it is I lived in AA meetings and did the fellowship. That is the only way I made it. I went to the 10:30 in the morning meeting, the noon, the 5:30, the 10:30 at night, and the midnight. And the midnight was dangerous because that was by candlelight, and all guys are cute in the candlelight. I mean, I thought Coffee Mate was a protein source. So that's the only way, man. I know people kind of, diss a little bit the fellowship, and I get it. I mean, you can't only have the fellowship, but I'm telling you, as a 17-year-old brain damaged savage girl, there was no way in for me but that. And I'm one of those weirdos who say, I'm grateful to be an alcoholic. I'm so grateful to be an alcoholic, because coming from the dark past where I grew up, there was no way out of that but you. And here's the gig on that whole thing, man. Like, of the 8 billion people on the face of the planet, that's only really a very small percentage of the 8 billion that are alcoholic, that drink like we drank. And of those, that small percentage, an even tinier, much tinier slice of those who made it into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I got to be refamilied, re-raised, rearranged, reborn. Our book says that word, so don't be mad at me. I'll never get over that this was my only way out, and somehow I got here. That dark past, where page 124. Here's the whole thing. I mean, when I was about 4 years sober, my father appeared back in my life, and he offered to pay for me to go to college. Well, that was a challenge because I barely made it out of high school. I graduated 382nd out of a class of 384. And rudely, they give you the whole list of class rankings with names, So like I'm not on the first page. Hello, typo. So I'm looking. I get to the very last page where I'm at the big, 382nd. And I look at the names of 383 and 384. And I said, God, they must be dumb. They're not in the upper echelon of 382 class. And then the other issue was to get into an undergrad, you have to take the ACT, and the most you can get is a 36. I got a four on my ACT. Swear to God, the line that says name, I got it wrong. I put ACT. Jesus. But I found a school back in Nebraska that would take people like me. And I'm so grateful for places like that. And I started undergrad when I had 4 years of sobriety, and I graduated with 8 years of sobriety. I triple majored. I was on the honor roll. I fell in love with academia, and now I have my master's degree, and I still am in love with academia. And I mean, all that's a miracle. But of the amazing things that happened in that little town that I moved to, getting my degree was the least of the miracles. The most important miracle is this. I fell in love with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in the nick of time, particularly with the fourth column, and most particularly with that part of the fourth column that has to do with forgiveness. Because that organ of hate and blame and self-pity, the dark thoughts of just wanting to end it, were still with me, man. That because you said that you could find freedom, I finally wanted freedom. Any price in humility I must pay, I would pay. And I set about the journey to get a real sponsor who is one that takes you through the big book and the steps. I mean, I got, it's not about talking about gardening. I have two of my sponsors are master gardeners. We enjoy gardening, but it's not the point of me sponsoring them. I'm just saying. But one of the other amazing things that happened in this little tiny little Nebraska town is there was this old timer there named Pat C. He had 32 years of sobriety, and me and my little sober friend had like 4 or 5 years. And Pat and his amazing wife in Al-Anon would drive me and my little friend to tiny little town Nebraska meetings. And the only people in these meetings besides us were old ranchers, old farmers, and old railroad men. So you did not be walking in there talking about your inner child. No. I learned my P's and Q's, how you be in an AA meeting by those old guys. There's this one old guy, man, Bill Hill, old railroad man, and he was a little bit mean, and he had 20 years of sobriety. So like, remember when you had like 4 or 5 years, somebody with 20 years was like, whoa. And so he was something else. And every once in a while I'd chair a meeting and I'd ask him to read How It Works, the laminated on both sides, How It Works. So he'd pick it up, the laminated thing I had given him, and he'd say this. He'd say, how it works, slowly, very slowly. And then he'd put it down, and nobody's messing with that guy. And the thing about Pat, the one he and Bess, who would take me and my little friend around to these amazing little meetings, is so I'm a historian. My master's is in history. Not that matters, but I'm a historian, and I understand war and battle. I'm getting to the point of all that. Pat was a World War II veteran. So, and I was a historian in undergrad as well. And so I guess because he knew I understood war and battle and kind of that particular conflict, he would tell me stories about the things he had seen as a 17 and 18-year-old veteran on the Western Front. Horrible things. And he'd end every story like this. He'd say, but Paula, there is one thing I will never tell. I was like, what the heck could that be? I mean, he told me horrible things. What more had he seen that he would not say? The other thing about Pat is, though he had 32 years of sobriety, he could tell you about an argument he had gotten in his first year of sobriety with a little local like clubhouse manager, which I know nobody argues with their clubhouse manager anymore, but Pat could tell you in detail about it. And 32 years later, he would never go back to that clubhouse. So me and my little friend graduated undergrad, moved to Georgia. We got a call that year that Pat, with 32 years of sobriety, had started drinking. He was dead in a year. I got that call and I put down the phone and I turned to my friend who had known and revered him also. I said, Pat is drinking. She said, you know what it was? It was that resentment. I said, you know what it was? It was that secret. And I have always wondered, that he died forever ago, 30-something years ago. And I've always wondered, what was that thing he would not say? And so now, like I said, I have my master's degree in history, and there was research released to us about that conflict, in particular, World War II, and that I wish, frankly, I had not read. There were first-hand accounts that we got to access that I wish I did not know. But always with an eye, with a curious eye, what is that thing that Pat would not say? And now I know. I would bet every dollar that I have, and I would win the bet, that the thing that Pat would not say is not something that he saw. It was something that he did. And the shame and the hate and the secret took 32 years to kill such a man. But in the end, that's what killed him. Tell your secrets. Tell your secrets. It is so rare for our big book to lay down that big hammer. Do this or die. Do this or drink. The fifth step is one of those places. It talks about not fully disclosing. Here's the whole deal on the telling of the secret. I know you think, I thought too, that the point in telling of our dark past, telling those dark secrets, is so we will be free. Yes, and that's great. That's 10% of the point, though. The whole 90 other percent of the point is because your secret will save someone. Think of Pat, 32 years worth of people he could have helped with those secrets. 32 years of wasted grace. Don't waste your pain, man. It almost broke you. Don't just throw it away. You can save a life with it. Why not? Save a life with it. I have two outside issues that do not belong. I'm a traditions woman. I am. And my outside issues do not belong in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, nor in a conference where I'm speaking, nothing. But I am going to mention them. You'll be all right. Buckle up. We're going to float in and then get right back out. And the point of them is because of service. So here you go. I have depression and I have post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, it's all right. Why I even bring it up at all is because until I was about 20 years of sobriety, they decide when they come or go. They decide their intensity. And until I was about 20 years sober, man, they just lay me low. I'd be in the bed because the darkness had descended. I was just going to wait it out. Or people would say, how you doing? I'd say terrified. My anxiety is off the charts. And I have tics because of the anxiety disorder. I still have the tics, but whatever. And they just would lay me out, And then at about 20 years of sobriety, I was in bed again because the darkness came. I was just going to wait it out like I always did. And God said to me, you can help somebody. So I got my fat ass out of bed because I could help somebody. And I think when we read later on in the first 164, that little phrase, happy, joyous, and free. And man, I think we hook onto that because it's happy, joyous, and free, or there's something wrong with me. It's happy, joyous, and free, or I need to inventory more. It's happy, joyous, and free, or I'm just not going to make it. And I got to keep the secret of how much sicker I am than you are. No, man. Save somebody anyway. Show up to that front line anyway. The holiest words we can say in AA are these: anyway and no matter what. And so I started showing up, man, no matter what. And because I'm a historian, I have my specialization is in the ever earth-shattering medieval British history. Heads up, side note, if that's ever something you want to get your master's degree in and spend a lot of money doing it, there will never be a day that you will open up the want ads in the local newspaper and it will say, wanted, British medieval historian. No, that doesn't happen. But because I had to study old battles to get that degree, There's something I noticed about our disease. Oddly enough, there's something I noticed. And here it is, man. I could take you all the way back from when Alexander the Great first crossed the Indus River to the Battle of Bosworth and Richard III screaming to trade his kingdom for a horse. And something I noticed about those battles is this. Never one time were those battles lost in the frontal attack. Never one time by the enemy that the standing army knew was coming, had prepared for, had probably fought before. No, those battles were lost on the flank. I read that and I thought, ooh, there's the land of alcoholism. On the sneaky sidelines by the enemy that had waited till just the right moment to appear. That's our disease, evolving still to this day for each of us, waiting, whispering just the words that will take your eye off the prize. Look over. We are facing an enemy we cannot win against in single-handed combat, and yet we must stay that front line. But here's how it looks, how it's different. With me still at the front line, at that front line with me is the God of my understanding. And that, the God of my understanding, has the sword and the shield. God is doing the fight. My sacred duty is to watch that flank. And even though I had done successive and powerful and helpful 4 steps straight out of the big book, man, I still had that organ of hate, and I had had vital spiritual experiences, and it became a different woman, and still though, man, enough of an outside thing, and I'd react with rage. The darkness of the memories would be too much. You know, these things would happen, and I wanted them gone. And I know they say there's only one step we do perfectly, and that's the first step. We don't take a drink perfectly one day at a time. But there's about a minute in that 7th step, man. If we take it all the way through, we got that stuff in the 4th and 5th, the needing it to be gone and ready for it to be gone. And then there's about a minute in the 7th step. We're like absolutely perfectly willing to have God take this. Well, that's the time when you put on your big boy girl pants, because it's a waiting game then. God decides when there's no more use for it. You just kind of keep trudging, looking at the gifts, keep going forward, keep serving. God will take it away when it's time. That's how God works. But mine was still there, man. It had abated, but it was still there, and I wanted it gone. And my first real freedom from that was this. I was 13 years sober, and I was going in to deliver my first son, and it wasn't going well. I'd been in labor for 36 hours, and we were both crashing. I had lost too much blood, and my baby was stuck in the birth canal. And they didn't know it, but the cord was wrapped around his neck. So with every contraction, my son was strangling. And I was on no drugs, not even a shot in my spine to not feel the labor. The room emptied of the normal doctor and the normal nurses and the normal equipment, and filled with the specialist. At that moment, I looked to this side of my bed, and walking up to my bed was my grandmother, who had died 10 years before, and my friend Craig, who had died of AIDS 5 months before. And they brought such peace. And I thought they were there for me. But they weren't there for me. At that same moment, as I'm looking at them, the new nurse had come on. I didn't even know she was in the room. And she leans over to me in this gorgeous Irish brogue, and she says, "Paula, I'm going to get you through this." And I guess because of her brogue, but I turned to look, and when I looked back, my grandmother and Craig were gone. She did get me through it, and I delivered my son. And the room went silent while they worked on him for a long time. And finally, they got him breathing. But even I, an inexperienced mother, could tell something was wrong. For just a second, before they took him away in the special equipment, they let me hold my son. And I looked down on him, and I saw that he was perfect and beautiful. And then, for no reason, out of nowhere, I thought of the men who had hurt me when I was a little girl. And I realized for the first time that they had been perfect and beautiful too. And someone else had turned them into monsters. That there had also been the day of their birth, when the doctor placed them in their mother's arms, and she had looked down on them and meant with every fiber of her being to keep them safe. But the liquid demon and the monster got in anyway and broke those babies. Who better than me to have compassion for what must have happened to those poor baby boys? And I was free. And it's compassion to this very day of my life that gives me freedom. If something annoys me, big or little, I don't really have big annoyances really anymore. I totally, am a Sandy Beach like accolade. And he said, when something comes up, you got about 10 or 15 seconds to make a decision which way you're going to go with that. You're going to go with God is everything, or you're going to double down on the injustice, double down on the resentment. Because once you go to the injustice and resentment, then it's a resentment, and now you got some work to do. And you don't know. Consequences are out the window because we are powerless of our resentments. So I just make the choice, man. You got a few seconds, make the choice. So here's what I do when something comes up. I'll look at it and I'll say, you know what? I don't know what it's like to be in those shoes of that person who annoyed me or hurt me or whatever. Maybe if I was in those shoes, I'd have done the same thing. And that's, again, how I forgave my mother, man, for, the bad, dark stuff that went down. And give me 10 more years of hard drinking. Give me being beaten by a terrifying man for 17 years. Give me 5 kids and poor and hungry and drunk. I'd have done the same thing. I could have done the same thing. And when I looked to my mama to save me, I was asking for an apple from an orange tree. She didn't have it in her to save me. Saving me was going to have to be up to God and me and Alcoholics Anonymous. When I was about 4 years sober in that first year of getting my undergrad, my sister and I, it was about 1983, my sister and I decided to drive 2 days before Christmas Eve all the way from Nebraska across the Great Plains into the Midwest, all the way to Washington, D.C. to visit another sister for Christmas in my crappy college car. So we take off from Kearney, Nebraska, and we have my little baby niece with us. And I was like 21 years old. And right before we get to Lincoln, Nebraska, the young woman ahead of us flipped her car all the way over, going 70 miles an hour. And so we pull over, this tow truck, or this semi-truck driver pulls over, and it was before there were cell phones. So she was okay. Her car was totaled, and she was alone, driving from Denver to Minneapolis, and now totaled car in Lincoln, Nebraska. So we put her in the car with us, and my sister and me and my little baby niece, and calming her down. And the truck driver called some tow truck driver or something in, and so we had to wait for that. And she was freaked out, you can imagine. And then when she got all settled and going off with the tow truck and all that, just before we left, I handed her $20, and my sister was so mad at me for giving her that $20, but whatever. So now we're way behind schedule. And now my sister loves shortcuts. She won't say, like, go on this interstate. She'll go, like, here's the dirt road. I'll bet it'll lead us to the next road and, whatever. So now we're in the middle of godforsaken Iowa, just past midnight. So now it's the day before Christmas Eve. There are no lights on this road we're in. It's in the midst of winter, and my car stops, just dies. No motor, no heat, no nothing. And now we're in some danger, and my little baby niece is in some real danger. And there were no lights. I couldn't see no farm light, no town lights, no signs, no lines on the road. So the plan was I was going to get out of the car and crapshoot guess which way to walk to try to find help. And just at that moment, on the only hill in Iowa come these 2 headlights. And my sister, not an alcoholic, says, "Oh, good help." I say, "Oh no, axe murderer." So it's this farmer dude. And farmers know everything, man. But anyway, so he stops his car and his truck, and he says, "Hey, what's the matter?" We're like, "We don't know. Like, the car just died." And I happen to have a wire coat hanger and duct tape in my car. It sounds like I was going to kidnap somebody, but he fixed my car with those two things, and the God is moving along, and before he took off, and we're like, oh my God, you saved us. Can we pay you anything? He goes, no. And we're like, really? I mean, you actually did save us, and we would be happy to pay you. And here's what he says to us. He says, take it as a present from him. In the first year of my sobriety, I was in a halfway house for a long, long time. And I was just at that point where I was looking at the miracles working in you and seeing that people who had God seemed to be happy. My scientific evidentiary mind. And I was at that point where I was going, maybe. But God had done me wrong, man. I was doubled down on the injustice. Yeah. But I was open, maybe. So I went to my counselor in that halfway house, and I started with the question, Maneva, start with it. I said, if there's a God, why did those bad things happen to me when I was a little girl? She said, oh, honey, God didn't make those things happen. Broken and faulty human will made those things happen. But now God has given you Alcoholics Anonymous to try to help you mend those things. So I say to you, take it as a present from him. When I was a little girl growing up in my mom's alcoholism, I was one of those weird kids in the neighborhood. Every neighborhood has one. My hair was matted. I was always outside or hanging out in somebody's garden shed or like just crazy, wearing the wrong clothes for the season. And I stunk and I was always hungry. And I was wandered the neighborhood and And there's a whole year of my childhood I can't remember, whatever. God will do something with that. But there's a couple memories that are vivid to me. And one of those is I was like 7, 8 years old, 6 or something, wandering the neighborhood and with my matted hair and how I stunk. And I could see into the neighbor's picture window. And it must have been dinner time, man, because they were sitting there together, talking to each other and laughing. And they had different kinds of food that came out of nice bowls, and they take it. I'm standing there right now, man. They take it out of their bowl and put it on a nice plate. I remember on the far side of that great green grass, look at that vision and knowing that was never going to be for the likes of me. But I am telling you made me a place at your banquet. You brought me into the light of your rooms. And then now, just like this year, my close friend Marty J out of Vancouver told me, he says, Paula, you have become that family in the picture window for other children. And I'd never thought of it before, but he's right, man. I pick up every stray kid or animal. There it is. I picked up one of my new sponsees during all this lockdown and stuff. I spoke at some conference on Zoom. Anyway, she was on it, and I always put my number in the chat, and she called, and she's just at that point. We come to a dark night of soul and sobriety too, and she was at that point, and she was saying, oh, you're so loving. How do you know to help me? How do you know? And it just struck me, the truth of that. And the truth is this, that if I had not been discarded, I would not know to not discard. If I had not been betrayed, I would not know to not betray. I told her, jokingly, but still, I said, Joe, thank me. Thank the family I grew up in. If I hadn't known, I wouldn't know. That's what God does with our dark past. And that does not just apply into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to end in a couple minutes, and I want to say just a few more things. One is this. That boy, he was born not breathing when I was 13 years sober. When he was about 12, he turned to me and he says, Mom, I'm afraid all the time, and I don't know why. But every one of you who heard that knows why. He just had not yet met his first liquid higher power. Oh, he has now. And that's the funny, ironic thing, but he came into the world strangled, and I'm so afraid that's the way he's going to take himself out. His little brother, who I had when I was 15 years sober, was the golden child, man. He was captain of 2 varsity sports, the school MC, super popular in special gifted education, school editor, so happy. He got prestigious scholarship to a prestigious university in Chicago where he met the demon. And in 41 years of sobriety, I've never seen this disease take someone as fast as it has taken him. He used to go missing in the winter in Chicago. And I was hyper-focused on his feet. Is that the silliest thing? But I'd say to my friends in AA, he's going to pass out in the snow and lose his feet to hypothermia. Finally, someone in AA said, Paula, losing his feet may save his life. And you can't argue with that. And then, of course, I went to the next place and I said, but they could die. What if they die? And someone in Al-Anon said, Paula, if they die, then you will plan their funeral. That's what good mothers do too. And you can't argue with that either. And I'll end with this. I spend our last precious dwindling minutes together talking and telling the story of my sons, though I know it's not my story to tell, but I do tell it. Because when I was drinking in the beginning of my sobriety, I was sure that my sad circumstances and my mother had caused my alcoholism. When I was a little girl, I was convinced that if I could have just had all those things I saw other little girls have, I'd be okay. My sons have had all those things, and they're not okay. They're dying of alcoholism. If you think someone else caused your alcoholism, I will be your proof that they did not. So show up with me at the front line. Let's walk into that fourth dimension. We never know who we can save. Thank you.